So now that I've given you a brief overview of the ABCs of CBT, you're hopefully starting to develop a deeper appreciation for yourself and how you actually function as a human being. Now, this section of the course, we're still in the introduction section, and yes, it's quite a long introduction. This is just how I like to roll. What I want to present you with here is a set of ideas, interesting, very unconventional, challenging, confrontational ideas as laid out by Mr. Albert Ellis back in I think it was the late 1950s, I do believe it was. Albert Ellis made a suggestion that there are a very, very small number of extremely dysfunctional beliefs and worldviews that we succumb to in life or subscribe to in life that trigger most of the unhelpful or undesirable emotions and behaviours that we experience or succumb to on a day-to-day basis. Our core beliefs are generally the underlying rules or the codes that we operate out of as human beings, and they tend to guide how it is that we act or behave or respond to the circumstances, events, life experiences that we work through in our lives. Now, what I want to do here, I just want to engage with you in dialogue, all right? I don't want you to be writing all these down, right? There's no point in doing this because Albert Ellis had, I think, around about 35 years of working with people on this beliefs level. And what he said, he identified very, very quickly was a common theme, a trend. They're all dysfunctional emotions and unhelpful habits, patterns of behaviour operate out of one of these beliefs, all right? Now remember, beliefs are just beliefs. They're not universal facts, they're not truths, they're just assumptions that we make in response to our earlier life's experiences, all right? So if we want to grow and develop and make shifts in our life, it's imperative that we identify any dysfunctional, unhelpful beliefs that we're operating out of. Because when we start making shifts within ourselves on a beliefs level, this can outwork itself and impact pretty much every single area of our lives. All right. So when people say, I don't believe anything, well, even that's a belief. All right. People say, it doesn't matter what we believe in life. Yep, it really does. Our beliefs provide us with the foundations upon which we base our every single decision upon. So we've got to get good at analysing and critiquing the accuracy of our beliefs to make sure that we're not falling victim to some unhelpful or inaccurate ones. All right. I need everyone that I know to approve of me. I need everyone that I know to approve of me. In fact, if anyone doesn't approve of me, this is going to be absolutely terrible. Have you ever known anyone to be a people pleaser? Are you yourself a people pleaser? Have you ever been guilty in the past of saying yes to people when you really want to say no and ever wondered why you do this? All right. There's a pretty good chance if you've ever worked in a job. I can remember spending my, obviously, however many years, 7 or 8 years or 9 years in the military. Military just seemed to be full of yes men. We used to call them yes men, people who would just say yes to anything because they might get a promotion or they might get approved of by a sergeant or they might get into the inner circle or something like this. And this isn't just common to the army, right? This is pretty much common throughout humanity as a race of people. Well, why is it that some people say yes to things and people that they just want to say no to? Why is it that sometimes we will compromise our own authenticity and our own sincerity, our own integrity as human beings for the purposes of keeping other people happy? Because we've all done this at some point in the past, me included, right? I had to work really, really hard on myself to make peace with myself so that I wouldn't conduct myself or carry myself like this anymore. This belief kind of, it can develop and grow in us when we're young, especially if we get told off by our parents a lot, or if we're perhaps in an abusive relationship with our parents that perhaps might be physically abusive or emotionally unavailable. And what we end up doing is we end up looking and desperately trying to get approved of by other people. And we'll sometimes say things that we think people want to hear, or we'll try to be the kind of people for other people that we think would lead them to approve of us more. And through the process, we compromise our own authenticity, our own uniqueness. Right? We sabotage our own true identity for the purpose of being who we think might be more pleasing to other people. Can you relate? Right? If not, there's a pretty good chance that you know someone who could relate to this. All right? This is a global, universal issue, but it's a belief, a dysfunctional belief that people operate out of. All right? All I'm going to do in this video is highlight them. In the later sections of the course, we're going to look at how to expose them, unpack them, and modify them, all right? Because that's when personal transformation occurs, right? This section of the course is about getting the basics, getting the foundations down so that the rest of the course we can build up, all right? Build up and you can become a highly effective CBT practitioner. So some people set up and go through life doing their best to avoid being disliked from any source. Some people will stay in a dead-end job that they absolutely hate for years, for decades. They'll give up the best years of their life just to keep a boss happy, or just to keep their husband happy or their wife happy, and sabotage their own fulfillment through the process. Can you see how damaging these dysfunctional beliefs are when people operate out of them? I mean, what about you? What is it that you're doing right now in life that you really don't want to be doing? I guarantee there's something. Do you have a relationship, a friendship, a family member who you just aren't yourself around? You know, when this person speaks, you just, there's something that you really want to say to them, but you just don't quite have the boldness or the confidence to be that honest with them. Well, it's because this belief is getting the better of you, if that is the case, all right? You need to be approved of by other people, and you'll compromise your own authenticity and your own sincerity through the process. And it's not because our intentions are bad. It's because we are living in accordance with what we believe, we should be doing in life. We live out of accordance with how we believe we should be living life. We live to live true to the rules that we set ourselves. And many of those rules that we set ourselves, we do back when we're very, very young. Right, when we interpret life's events and situations and experiences completely inaccurately, and then we become bound by these rules for many, many years. Can I share with you a story before we unpack these to help you really grasp a better understanding of just how damaging some of these beliefs can actually be? I can remember back when I was around about maybe 8 or 9 years old, my mum and dad used to take me and my sister to the circus back when we were young. We lived in a city called Dundee here in Scotland, and I used to hate going to the circus. My sister liked all the trapeze artists and the clowns, and I wasn't really bothered in that for that kind of thing. But I quite liked the animals, if there was a bear or an elephant or something like this. And I always wondered about the elephants. How is it that a human being could tame an elephant and get it dancing for peanuts and walking around the auditorium or the circus ring, because it's one of the largest mammals on the face of the planet, isn't it? Well, it was actually only around about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I read an article, and this was about how it is that circus masters get new elephants into the circus. What they'll do is they'll go across to one of the African nations when a young baby elephant has been saved by some sort of charitable organisation. Perhaps his parents have been killed or poached or something like this. So the circus master will find a young elephant, and when it's very, very young, they'll ship it back to the main circus training area. They'll tie a rope around its neck, attach this bit of rope to a picket or a stake that's driven into the ground, and then they'll leave the elephant there. Yes, they'll feed it and they'll give it water, and that's it. Now, this young baby elephant will try to tug and kick and break free from the peg, but because it's a baby elephant, it's physically not strong enough to break free. So the circus master's wise. He's quite smart. He knows, or she knows, that the elephant isn't ready to start being trained until it stops trying to break free from the picket that's been driven into the ground. Because the circus master knows that once the elephant stops trying to break free, well, that's the same day that the elephant has grown to accept and believe that it's not strong enough to break free. So, fast forward 15 years, and now little baby elephant is fully grown, big elephant, mummy or daddy elephant, something like this. And it can get marched into the arena, but anytime it has that bit of rope around its neck, it goes wherever it's led. And see, if you attach that bit of rope to a picket or a stake in the ground, the elephant won't even try to break free from the picket or the peg. Why? Because it learned back when it was young that it's physically not strong enough to break free. And this is the damaging nature of our beliefs, especially if we succumb to inaccurate ones. They can act as this noose around our neck that prevent us and hold us back from being as effective as what we could otherwise be in virtually all areas of our lives. I need everyone I know to approve of me. Noose around neck. I must avoid being disliked from any source. Says who? What will happen if someone disapproves of you? What's the worst that could happen? Well, you feel something. We've got to start analysing and looking at ourselves from this angle. Some people genuinely believe, and this is a real sad one, that to be a valuable person, I must succeed in everything that I do. Now, I worked in the business world for quite a number of years as a business marketing consultant, and I can remember some of the guys used to work alongside. They would be working from sort of 6 o'clock in the morning until maybe 10, 11 o'clock at night. Now, I could never be bothered with that. I would start at 9 o'clock or maybe 5:15 or sometimes maybe 9:30 if I could get away with it. But as soon as 5 or 5:30 came around, I was out of there. I was away doing my thing. But many guys wouldn't. They were there. It was kind of like they were addicted to success. And success is an addiction in life. Well, it depends how we kind of define success, doesn't it? Because you can type in, what does success mean on Google, and all sorts of definitions can come up. Money, houses, materialistic possessions. Some people might define themselves by being happily married with 2.4 healthy, mature children. Some people might define themselves as being successful in life once they've got grandkids sitting around the fireplace, when they're old and grey. Some people might define personal success as just simply being true to one's values. Some people might define success as being authentic, a person of integrity, of sincerity. But it's up to you. How do you define success? And to be a valuable person, must you be successful? What's driving you in life? Now, I think it was when I was studying CBT, or possibly it was counselling, one of my mentors and tutors at the time noticed that I was a very, very driven man. And I can remember being absolutely stopped in my tracks when this mentor said, "Kane, you're such a driven person." And I would go on and say, yes, I'm a really driven person. I'm passionate about making a difference, and I want to do this, and I want to do that, and I want to do the next thing, and naturally extroverted and high energy person that I've always been. And then my tutor stroke mentor said, "Yeah, that's fantastic. I've noticed this, Kane, and I wonder what it is that really drives you. I mean, at the core, I wonder what it is that you're really trying to achieve." And that was me, sent into this place of reflection. And it took me a couple of months to really work that one out. Most of my life's efforts and most of my drive had actually been underpinned and motivated by me trying to prove myself. I spent most of my teens and 20s trying to prove myself to people, right? Trying to be noticed by my dad and things like that. And that's not a particularly healthy motivation, but I guess that on some level I believed that I actually needed that. Otherwise I would never have committed to acting and behaving in this way. So I'm self-disclosing a little bit here, but to really show you the power that beliefs can actually have in our lives if we're not aware of what they are. They can underpin our every decision, our every action, and really drive our behaviour. So it's good to become wise of ourselves. So, it's not okay for me to make mistakes, and if I do, I'm bad. Well, that's just a rather unhelpful assumption to make in life, isn't it? I mean, I don't know about you, but the greatest and most profound life lessons that I've learned have come through the greatest mistakes that I've made. But I'll know many people who will stay and never step outside of the comfort zone, and who would live and commit to a life of boredom and drudgery. People have come to me in the past and have said, "Kane, I'm depressed." And I like to question people's frames of reference sometimes, the way in which they relate to themselves. And granted, a person might very well be feeling sad and feeling depressed. But I like to just integrate a bit more context sometimes, help people to expand their picture of the world, because the map's not always the territory, is it? When a person says, Kane, I'm depressed, I say, are you depressed or are you just lonely? Or are you lonely and bored? Or what is it? I mean, what's triggering what's actually triggering the depression here? And 9 times out of 10, in fact, more often than not, people who've come to me saying, yes, I'm depressed, end up leaving saying, yes, I'm actually just really bored, or I'm really isolated. And here's the thing, we can work with isolation. We can get some goals and set a plan in place to resolve the isolation problem. We can get some goals and set a plan in motion to resolve the boredom issue. But we can't really put a plan in place to resolve the depression issue. We might as well send that person back to the doctors to get some medication. And that certainly isn't going to resolve any issues. All right? So, some people get themselves in a real state and end up bored and isolated because they will not step outside of the comfort zone. And they will not step outside the comfort zone because they're petrified of making mistakes, because they learned at some point earlier in their development that it's not okay to make mistakes. Perhaps they got it wrong. They tied the shoelaces in the wrong way. And we know that there's some pretty bad and some pretty poor, some pretty ineffective parents out there. I mean, living here in Dunfermline, myself and Karen, my wife, we cringe sometimes when we look at the way in which some parents speak to and relate to their children. We'll walk through the town centre and a child is screaming and playing up, trying to get the attention of the grown-up, the parent, and then the parent is screaming and shouting and swearing and tearing the child down, telling them to be quiet and not make any noise. Oh my goodness, who's worse, the screaming child or the screaming adult? And I'm saying most behaviours and habits and attitudes tend to be learned, all right? More often than not, we go through life being more like our parents than what we would even care to acknowledge or even imagine. So, it's not okay for me to make mistakes. I mean, is it okay for you to make mistakes? Think about it, yes or no. All right, but think about the times in the past when you've made mistakes and learned from them and grown through the process. Well, then it becomes okay to make mistakes. It all depends about how we are interpreting life, the rules that we are operating out of. People should strive to ensure that I'm happy always. Right? People should make my happiness their number one priority. It's kind of like I am at the center of the universe. That's right. The world revolves around me. You are bound to know someone who adopts this attitude to life. It's kind of like some people like to see themselves as being numero uno, the primary center point of the world, of the universe, and it's everyone else's role to serve them, to keep them happy. And if anyone says or does something that doesn't make them happy, my goodness, they are bad. It's kind of like no one else's agenda in the world is as important as mine. No one else's happiness in the world is as important as mine. No one else's fulfillment or life is as important as mine. And some people contract a condition that the DSM hasn't yet acknowledged yet. They might do someday, who knows? They acknowledge quite a few crazy conditions these days. Self-consumptionitis, right? You heard this here first, all right? Kane Ramsey, that's right. This is a real condition, self-consumptionitis. And this is where people are so completely self-consumed within themselves, they cannot see anyone else, anyone else's wants, anyone else's needs, anyone else's goals, anyone else's values or priorities as being any more significant than their own. They are the number one priority in life, and that's it. And then some people worry or get confused when they end up isolated, lonely, no one wants to be around them, then they get depressed. And they say, I've contracted a depression illness. It's got nothing to do with the attitude that I take towards people or the fact that I'm completely self-consumed and focus only on myself. Oh no, it's the illness's fault then. Why? Because people don't like to take responsibility for the part that they play in their own demise. This would require humility. all right? And humility requires self-control, all right? My friends, life is a progressive journey. We're all somewhere on the way. So people who don't make me happy should be punished, right? How many people do you know in life who go out on little vengeance missions, all right? You know when one person doesn't get what they want from someone else, and then they take it upon themselves to go in competition or go in some sort of vengeance mission. People do this. And again, this kind of walks hand in hand with the self-consumption-itis condition that some people contract. And that's not a real condition, by the way. I just made that one up. People who don't make me happy should be punished. Again, who is it that makes us the center of the universe? Why is it that we should be more important and our wants and hopes and goals and ambitions and dreams should be any more important than anyone else's? If only people would learn to see eye to eye and learn to work together and seek to understand each other, then we wouldn't have to worry about this competitive nature that many cultures succumb to throughout the world today. Things must work out the way that I want them to work out all of the time. All right, well, this is kind of like the assumptions idea that I've shared a few times, that people are very, very rarely disappointed in what they find. They're only ever disappointed when their expectations aren't met. Now, to be honest with you, I absolutely hate expectations. I really do. Being a creator or a contributor into the world, right? Anyone who's ever written a book or anyone who's ever produced a bit of art or something, they know better than to have opinions of other people's best efforts in life. Why? As a creative, I can only speak for myself when I say that whether you like this and are enjoying this course or whether you're not, is irrelevant because I'm doing my very, very best, all right? Doing my best to communicate and present and articulate and make the course as insightful and as entertaining and as enjoyable and followable as what I'm physically able to in my own unique, imperfect way. But people still end up disappointed, right? Sometimes we receive hate mail saying, you said this and you've said that and you've said this and you should have done that and the video editing should have been edited this way and all that kind of thing. And here's the thing. People sometimes are off this mindset that things should be the way that they think they should be, rather than just appreciating things for what they actually are. Could you imagine how much more enjoyable life would be for you if you were to cut all expectations out of your life from people, from things, from processes, from items, from purchases? Next time you go to a movie, you have no expectations on what it's going to be or what it's not going to be. You just go along and enjoy the process. All right? How enjoyable could life actually become? All right? I do my best to build this habit of non-expectancy into my life. And I'll tell you what, I generally live quite a joyous life, all right, in a non-judgmental way. I don't judge people or things before I've experienced them, and I do my best not to judge people or things after I've experienced them also. But again, this requires some self-control, which is just self-management that only ever comes about and becomes more prominent in us as we grow in self-awareness. You with me? So we've got to understand what the limiting beliefs are that might be acting as that noose around our neck, holding us back from experiencing life in its fullest before we ditch those beliefs and step into something more empowering and something more rewarding for us.